Organizations such as ours try to empower the people to help themselves.
Tonight from Chicago, Making Government Work.
Listening to America is made possible by Mutual of America and its family of companies, major underwriters of group pension plans and retirement savings programs. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, a catalyst for change. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers like you. Additional funding is provided by the Joyce Foundation.
I'm Bill Moyers, and we're listening to America Tonight in Chicago. We're here because some Chicagoans have decided it's not enough just to complain about the failures of government, not enough just to bemoan the power of special interests or the follies of public officials. It's not even enough, they say, just to vote. They've decided that the hard work of democracy is to get involved, to organize at the grassroots, to become a participant instead of a spectator. You'll meet them in a moment. Their efforts have attracted the attention of the National Commission on State and Local Public Service. The commissioners have been holding hearings all over the country, exploring how to make government work, how talented people can be attracted to public service, and how faith can be restored again between government and citizens. Touring some neighborhoods here in Chicago, the commissioners looked at some unique local partnerships where citizens and officials are working together to make a difference. Some of the members of the National Commission on State and Local Public Service are with us in the studio. Liz Hollander, the former planning commissioner of the city of Chicago. Former Governor William Winter of Mississippi, the chairman of the commission. Eddie Williams of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And political scientist Richard Nathan, director of the Rockefeller Institute of Government at the State University of New York. Look at another form of public business. This is a report from Barbara Williams on neighborhood control of Chicago's parks.
I played baseball over at the parks and basketball, and they had touch football, and our grammar school football team played in the parks.
I learned how to sew, and I learned everything from ballet to sports.
I know. Yes. Radio. Yes. Television. Yes, yes, yes. Radar. Yes.
There was baseball. There was football. There were things to do for a kid who grew up in, was in a working class neighborhood.
Chicagoans love their parks in a way that goes beyond neighborhood ties. The parks are places of memory, of independence from the concrete city. It's no wonder, then, that the Chicago Park District is said to spend 3 times as much money per acre than any other park system in the country. The budget for the city's 561 parks exceeds $342 million. That's because the Park District is more than baseball diamonds, swing sets, and beaches. It includes city museums, the Lincoln Park Zoo, and Soldier Field, home of the Chicago Bears football team. It also includes gardens and golf courses, sports leagues, and classes for children and adults. The president of the Park District's Board of Commissioners is Richard A. Devine.
It isn't enough to say we have a city and we have a police department to protect life and property and we have a fire department to put out fires. We want to have an atmosphere in this city where people feel they can lead their lives to the fullest.
Since 1988, there's been a change in these green spaces. The parks are now being run by the people who use them. Under a program called decentralization, power has been taken from downtown and placed out in the neighborhoods. The city has been divided into 17 clusters, each like a small park district itself. Each park in the cluster is run by an advisory council. This is a group of neighbors who decide what programs they want in their park. The supervisor of each park implements those programs, and the cluster manager gets each park material and services they need to run the programs. 70 parks, playlots, and beaches on the north side are managed by Kathleen Gartland.
working with advisory councils, that's probably the most positive thing that has come out of decentralization, is that they have a voice now. They have someone that they can talk to instead of one or two people downtown, and they can never find the right person.
For years, the Park District had been an important political arm of the city's democratic machine. Park workers were considered a patronage army, and parks in neighborhoods out of favor received little or no resources from downtown. That was the finding of the federal government when, in 1983, it issued a civil rights decree against the Park District. The decree charged that Black and Hispanic neighborhood parks had been allowed to decay. The Park District agreed to spend $10 million each year, bringing resources back to neglected parks. With that, machine control of the parks had been broken. By 1988, decentralization became the operating program. The following year, the civil rights decree ended.
Decentralization was brought in as advertised to make the parks more accessible to local communities, but in reality what it was to dismantle the political arm of the Cook County Democratic Party that was vested there.
John Cass has covered the Park District for the Chicago Tribune.
The park programs are even more run down than ever before at a time when they're truly needed, particularly in the inner cities. It has given the anti-machine folks a chance to invest their own people, their own bureaucrats and their own patronage in the bureaucracy.
Because the Civil Rights Consent Decree ordered money spent in neglected parks, funds weren't available to others. The neighbors around Indian Boundary Park had a problem. The 13.5-acre park had always been the centerpiece of a white middle-class neighborhood. By 1986, the North Side neighborhood hadn't changed, but the park had. The dangerous old playground equipment was removed, and because of the federal decree, no monies were available for rebuilding. So the Indian Boundary neighbors did it themselves. A group of neighbors raised almost $50,000. With the help of an architect, they designed and built their own playground. Mindy Heidekat worked on the project from the beginning. When she brought her daughter to play here for the first time, she felt
very protective. Not of my daughter or the playground. That this was our playground, and actually that's one of the concepts behind the process of building a playground with the community, that the community does feel that it's theirs, that they feel protective and involved in the playground's welfare and not just their children's welfare.
Before the playground was built, about 1,000 people came to Indian Boundary Park each year. The park now has 20,000 visitors a year, and the experience of building a playground has also produced one of the strongest advisory councils in the city. Decentralization is still being debated. Critics wonder if it works for all the people.
Those who have resources and access to power can organize and get something done for their parks. But what I'm talking about are poor people, Black, white, Hispanic, working people who need a place for their kids to play and work and to run off some of that steam from the time they come home from school till the time they go to bed. And they don't have that. And they say they have it, but they really don't.
Though the framework now exists for the parks to serve all the people, citizens must become active, and park supervisors must be enthusiastic if the city is to meet all the needs of all its children.
Irma Tranter is executive director of the Friends of the Parks. Are there instances where community groups have risen to the occasion only to be frustrated by downtown power?
Absolutely.
Still?
Absolutely.
Give me an example.
In a very troubled neighborhood right now, Englewood, we have severe gang problems, high unemployment, very high level of poverty. But the community saw the need for a recreation facility, obviously, to provide opportunities for kids early on, to get them in after school, to get them in on weekends, to organize, to provide educational and recreational and cultural opportunities. They succeeded. They succeeded in getting a facility. Took them a long time. What's the problem with that? It's basically locked to the community. I mean, if you're a 12-year-old and want to knock on the door and feel that you can handle that, then you can get in. So they have been frustrated, so frustrated, they got to the point of building it, and now there's a problem of how do you get it to operate? And it's been in operation several years. And the frustration, that level is so severe there that the community is now dealing, I mean, they have such severe problems in that community that this is one of the smaller issues once again. They kind of got burned out.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do they just give up?
For a while, they gave up on this issue, yes. And it's going to take another organizing battle in a sense that something can be done, showing where other communities have done it, and perhaps, you know, providing support from outside the system.
Well, that brings us to our next witness, Jim Hobson, who is the park supervisor for one of the largest parks in the city. Mr. Hobson, does it help in this work to have been a combat platoon sergeant in Vietnam?
Well, it certainly does. As you mentioned earlier, am the supervisor of Garfield Park, and that happens to be one of the largest parks in the system. I also just recently came from one of the smallest parks in the system. And so when I think in terms of the problems that we face at Garfield Park and Kiwanis Park, they're all similar in nature. Let me give you an idea. Garfield Park has the most number of murders in the city, Garfield Park community, the most number of murders in the city. We have the most number of unemployed black males in the city, and we have the most number of syphilis in the whole city. This is a serious problem. Garfield Park, just prior to 1990, had very few programs that were functioning. They were there in place, but they were not functioning. Now, just a year and a half later, Garfield Park has the #1 team in gymnastics. It's the largest gymnastics program in the city. We came in 4th in the city. We are citywide champions in boxing, citywide champions in wrestling. This is empowerment. It could not have happened with just me. What we did was we went out and we formed a coalition that included business, community organizations, political leaders, and the whole spectrum of the community. We brought that in there.
There are people watching who want to know exactly how did you do that.
I have a goal. My goal is to try to avoid this, have children avoid the dehumanizing elements that are in our cities. I served in Vietnam for 2 years. You know, my mission was to seek out, capture, and to destroy the enemy with those 47 men. And now I'm doing a similar thing at Garfield Park. Only in this instance, it's the loss of our children. Our children are dying out here in the streets.
Tell us about your first day on the job 12 years ago.
Well, my first day on the job, when I came in in a suit and tie. On one end of the court, there was a gang called the Vice Lords. Were fighting a rival gang. I had a suit and tie and a briefcase on at Kiwanis Park. I turned around, and I went home and got into some other clothes. I realized what was needed there.
If you can't beat them, join them.
That's right. But let's not forget this. It took a coalition of people. It cannot be one individual or 2 individuals or one community organization. It takes a community effort. Government works if you have the right people in place.
But only if you have a combat veteran from Vietnam saying.
Forget the combat veteran. You know, remember, we have a multitude of programs, and it's going to take the effort of each of the park supervisors. Over 200 of the parks of the 561 are staffed. And we are working diligently with these community organizations to come up with solutions to the problems. They're right there in front of us. When you have children who are walking down the street in Garfield and are afraid to cross the street, there's something wrong. If you go over to Inglewood and they can't even go to school, something is wrong. So what we have said at Garfield Park, and as we set up in the Rogers Park community where Kiwanis Park is housed, we're not going to take it anymore. There are more of us than there are of you. And we're going to take these parks back, and we're going to make the supervisors accountable, we're going to make the community accountable, and we're going to make the people that we serve accountable.
Eddie Williams, this talk of parks seems a long way from your fields of economics and politics. Is there any relationship?
There's a great relationship. The fundamental issue here is one of power and empowerment, and it is an issue of the people being in charge of their lives, bringing programs and decisions as close to the people as we can. and that is as old as America and as American as apple pie, and it works more effectively and more efficiently in some areas than in others.
What does it take to make it work?
It takes...
Other than a Jim Hobson and an Irma Trader.
Well, it takes them, it takes leadership, and it takes greater involvement in the political process. That's how we get people in positions in the first place. They aren't just found because they were Vietnam veterans. Somebody found them, searched for them, and got them into these jobs, and they use that creative, visionary leadership to accomplish goals that are important to the community. There is no substitute for that leadership, whether in a poor community or in an upper-income community.
When you see people like Jim Hobson and Irma Trader, what do you think about the seething discontent that the press keeps talking about in the country and the disillusionment that we hear is settling in over America toward our political and governmental institutions?
Well, I think we're looking at the wrong place. We're looking at the celebrity, spin-doctored, soundbite, high politics of the television clip. And we're not getting out, as this commission does, and as we should try to get other people to do, to see the hard work of wonderful people in government who are making things happen, who believe, care, have deep knowledge. We're not looking at the right part of the system, and that's something that the commission and Governor Winter's been very strong in urging us to look at to make exactly this point, that there are unsung heroes and wonderful stories, and government is a lot deeper and more complicated and important in people's lives than what we're exposed to every day in the sort of popular culture of particularly this campaign. It's disturbing.
What would you like to say to this commission?
I think there is discontent in government overall. I think we have huge bureaucracies. I think I see that as a reality in our communities in the city of Chicago. However, balanced with that, I don't see the frustration getting to a level where people are giving up. Matter of fact, I see quite the opposite, where they're rolling up their sleeves and saying, this isn't my neighborhood, this is my community, it's not happening fast enough, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to put pressure on it. I don't like I don't like the pace of government, and I'm going to keep shoving. We're going to push, and it's this bottom up where it's changing. It's changing in the local neighborhoods. It's changing in some parks. It's really much easier when you have a Jim Hobson in charge of a park. And we always said the solution to Chicago's parks is clone Jim Hobson. That's not going to happen. We're just trying to find more examples, and there are others. So it's community, really, putting the pressure on what is there to make it work for their neighborhood.
Jim Hobson, what is the key for dealing with that gang that you encountered the first day on your job?
Well, I think that, first of all, we have to recognize the economic problems that we are experiencing in this country. We also have to recognize that the deterioration of our cities. We have to recognize that, and we also have to recognize the value system in our homes and in our country has gone amok. And we have to return to those traditional, and I say traditional values. I believe in traditional values. And that is the only way that we're going to regroup and reclaim our country. In terms of the gangs are certainly here. They're here to stay if we do not address the problems of our children. It is very difficult for the Park District or any other major entity that provides services to children as well as the rest of the community to have any impact when a child is hungry at night, when a child can't get a decent education. We're not going to stop trying. The Park District is working very diligently in addressing every one of those problems.
What did you do when you changed from your suit to your street clothes and came back to the park, specifically? What's the first thing you did?
Well, first of all, I had to get the community involved, and so I wanted to find out who the political leaders were and who the community leaders were. That was my first and primary objective. Once I found that out, then it was smooth sailing. We had 18 murders in and around that park between 1975 and 1980. Since assuming assuming
does help. Traditional values.
Assuming responsibility.
Military traditional values.
Assuming responsibility for the park. For the next 10 years, we never had another murder, and we were considered one of the best parks in the city, just as we are at Garfield Park now.
That's an inspiring story, and thanks to both of you. For our next report, Barbara Williams took her cameras to Chicago's West Side community of Austin to look at some community policing.